Well, all this exhibition space isn't all that's new at the Peabody Essex Museum. It's just installed its first new director in more than 25 years. His name is Brian Kennedy, and he already has a vision of where he'd like to go. Brian Kennedy, thank you so much for joining us. New director here at the Peabody Essex Museum. What is it for you to come in at this time of you're bringing great change, first director in more than 25 years, and this museum is about to have this entire expansion. What is this moment for you?
This is my fourth directorship, so I've done things before, but this is a very different kind of museum. It's grown massively in the quarter century, and so the next period is working out what to do built on great success. So.
When you say it's a different museum, how do you see it?
This museum is founded as the oldest continuous museum in the country on the journeys of sea captains all over the world, bringing back objects and multi-sensory experiences that they enjoyed and then could tell stories about when they came back to Salem. And today, with the growth of world population, of course, huge demographic shift, this museum has collections of the very countries that are exploding geographically or demographically.
Well, as you consider what these collections are and how they will be available to your public, is there a different way that they should be told, a different way that they should be made accessible?
Well, one of the reasons that PEM was attractive to me is that for 20 years I've been really exploring how museums can be sites of multisensory engagement, and this museum has practiced experiential learning and offering opportunities to engage with objects in curious and wondrous ways. So building upon that here will be a joy, and I think that's the future of museums.
You rank in the top 10 largest museums in the country with this expansion. What kind of responsibility comes with that? The
amount of historic asset, built asset here is pretty unusual for museums. The number of buildings in Salem that are under the responsibility of the museum. But then the museum itself, its built edifice has grown so much over a quarter century. So putting those two things together is quite a responsibility, but we've got to work out what to do about them.
Well, I wonder what kind of liberties you feel that you have here. I often hear from directors of major city museums that they feel like they have to be one way because they're in a major city, but you're kind of outside of that zone. More opportunity for experimentation, I would imagine.
And that's certainly been the history here, experimentation, but also I think reach to foreign countries, to other places, and an appeal to tourism across the collections, and exploring the collections and developing on those I think will be a big activity over coming years.
Is it too early to ask you how you'll program? We are used to very different programming, everything from fashion to fine art to Native American art here at the museum. In which direction will you take it programming-wise?
As a general spirit, over my time in museums, I would be known as somebody who wants to engage the community, to develop a concept of a greater porosity, a porous museum, one that is not so much a wall as an opportunity to share. And so I think people can expect a lot more engagement and partnership and collaboration as we develop into a period where we're not really trying to build more buildings, but trying to use what we've got.
Well, how do you make it more porous? That has been a conversation that's been happening in this region, in particular over the last 4 or 5 months, making a museum open and accessible to every last person in the community, especially communities which have historically felt that they're not welcome or not invited into museums?
There's, the idea of being open and available on the one hand, and then trying to create all the interactions that cause people to want to come. The main thing is to be friendly in tone and welcoming, and then people can consume as they want to, but you try to provide them with things that they'd want to experience.
When you say interactions, and I know you've likely done this historically at your other institutions, but what kinds of things do you find work?
I think offering people the opportunity to hear themselves, more than telling them what you think. Offering them the opportunities to engage with material culture, with objects in a museum, with experiences in a museum, and to share those experiences. Offering the opportunities to engage with the museum digitally before they ever get there, to contribute in social media about their experiences. All these are relatively new phenomena for museums, and all of them and many others, but mainly the tone of the museum, that it doesn't seem like an edifice that keeps people out, but really seems like a place that keeps, invites people in.
Well, you've led or been in leadership positions in museums across the world. Are we distinct in the United States in terms of our museum going and our experiences?
You're talking about a private, independent museum that's not publicly funded directly. That's distinctly different from many parts of the world, and indeed many museums in America, which receive some public funding either from the city or from governments in the national galleries that I've worked in. That's one side of things. The other is the sense of community, a sense of place. And I mean, there's certainly a sense of place and an opportunity for creative placemaking here in Salem, where people hold very strongly to an extraordinary history.
You'll come to learn that I ask every museum director this: where do you stand on free admission? Something that people say would level the playing field for inviting and getting everyone into the museum.
Well, behavioral economists would say that's not true. That if you make a museum free, you don't necessarily increase your audience over time, and you don't necessarily expand the reach. On the other hand, I've only worked in free museums. And so when I went to Australia, I had the agreement to the government that if I could in my first year make the place free, I would. But there's economic issues, of course, and then there's lots of other issues. There's the environment that surrounds you. There's what, is the price sensitivity for people. But if you're talking about making things available for everybody, well then the consumption of the museum and the barriers to access have to be considered first and foremost. So I expect that issue will certainly be topical in the first 6 months.
Well, where do you come down on it? Having had the experience in Toledo and Ireland, at the Hood, in Australia, where you had free admission, you can look at how both have worked or haven't worked.
Well, I mean, I could say historically, obviously, where I came down on it was I worked in free museums, right? But I'm not an autocrat. I mean, so you come in, you work out what does everybody want to do and what's possible, and only if you can make the place sustainable and make it more relevant by doing that would you do it.
While we're on the subject of money, much has been made of this museum's endowment, $500 million. Mm-hmm. Have you had that experience before, and what does that give you to have that kind of figure behind you?
In Toledo, we had half that amount of money, $250 million. These are extraordinary sums of money to many people, but at a 5% take, it's not so big. It's a way of funding. It's something that I really agree with, offering the opportunity to people to sustain a museum over time. It bears a huge responsibility, however, because the legacy of all that donation requires you to think very, very carefully of how you use it.
Well, it gives you some security, I would imagine.
Oh, look, it's a very comfortable position relative to many museums to know that 60% of your money is looked after before you start. And I've had that luxury, actually, in the museums I've worked in. But that gives you great latitude to be very socially engaged and community focused.
Where do you see your role and the museum today? We're in a very tough time in this country. Lots of dialogue. We see lots of artists responding to what they see going on, the turmoil in the country and all over the world right now. Do you see yourself becoming an active part of that?
Active, certainly. Activist, that's not with a big A anyway. I've always been concerned about policy, but not politics with a P. I mean, we're a charitable institution under the Charities Act, so we're required not to be partisan. However, that's not to be not concerned about things that really matter to people. The museum space is, well, it reminds me of the quotation from W.B. Yeats, Irish poet, it's problematic when the polarities grow and the center cannot hold. And I think that the place for the museum is to be an expanding center. That it brings people in from edges and brings them closer together, just like the founders of this museum did. And that's about creating tolerance, creating understanding, indeed empathy, but respect, just respecting lots of points of view, politically, religiously. It's to accommodate all points of view and bring them to some sort of commonality around a shared experience.
And finally, I've heard you describe yourself again and again as an art educator. On a fundamental level, how do you describe what that is as it relates to you?
So, it sort of goes to the question, what is a work of art? And a work of art is something that causes an emotional reaction. I mean, it can be good or bad, but if it's an emotional reaction, it's a work of art. It might be a good work of art. And so that's an extraordinary experience that makes the spacing between us and an object or an experience what we cherish. And the most important aspect of being a human is negotiating time and space. And museums are all about time and space.
Well, Brian Kennedy, yes, I think you've come to the right place. It's great to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much. Pleasure.